Welcome to CS1203 Database Systems 1. This is the Unit 3 lecture, Part 1. During this lecture, we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of trying to cover material from within the course, we're going to go through an example and a demonstration of using the DIA tool to create entity relationship diagrams. DIA is the tool that we have recommended, and you'll see recommended in your course materials, for creating ER or entity relationship diagrams. And I wanted to take you through the process of doing that so you kind of understood how to use the tool to complete the assignment. Now, to do this, rather than installing it on my local computer, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make use of the virtual computing lab environment that we all have access to from within the University of the People. So I'm going to walk you through that. So we're going to kill two birds with one stone. One of them being is to give you an introduction and understanding of how to take advantage of and use the virtual computing lab. And then secondly, we're going to show you how to use DIA and some of the open office tools to complete the assignment that we have in Unit 3. So let's just jump right into it. There is a link in the main course site of the CS1203 material that allows us to get access to the virtual computing lab. Now, the virtual computing lab is an environment that we have created for at the University of the People that provides students that may not have a lot of access to computing resources, may not have the opportunity to install all of the tools that we require in computer science on a local computer, because perhaps they're borrowing a computer, using one at work. Perhaps you're using a computer that's in an internet cafe or something of the like. So what we have provided is access to a virtual computing lab, a desktop environment that you can access entirely from within a browser. And the only requirement that we have of this today is that you need to have access to an internet browser on a computer that supports Java. And most computers do in fact support Java, and most of them will have particularly all the Windows-based systems will typically have Java installed by default. So where we're at right now is the login screen. And before we go in and log on, I just want to show a couple of quick points. First of all, you get to this screen by clicking on the link in the course page. There's going to be a link out there that says Virtual Computing Lab. When you click on that link and you actually have Java installed on your computer, it's going to come up with this page. The first thing I want you to do, however, is to click on this button that's called Advanced Settings. And when you see that come up, it's going to come up with a few of these additional options. And you can see this one over here, it's called Mode, and it has two options. One of them is Desktop, one is Portal. What I want you to do is make sure that you have selected the one that says Portal. Portal basically will not show us a traditional desktop. It actually is going to give us all of the applications and information that we would have in a desktop in a web portal screen. The reason we want to use this is because it has dramatically better performance than the traditional desktop does. So I want you to make sure that you use Portal because we get really much better performance doing it this way. Once that's done, we're going to go in and put in our password. Now, what I wanted to make everyone aware of is everyone that asks me or sends a request will have, and I will provide you with a login ID into the virtual computing lab, so you can just simply go into the drop-down list, find your name, and then use that selection to log in. If you have not asked for a particular user login, that's okay, because there's a generic one out here for the CS1203 course. So if you scroll through the list, you're going to find a login for CS1203. And just keep in mind that the password for that particular login account is UOPEOPLE. So University of the People. And you just type that in as the password and we can log in. So this is what you're going to see when you go to log into the system. It's going to come up with that icon, and then from there it's going to display your desktop screen. In my case, you can see that we have all of the applications that I have access to, or the tools or technologies are to the left in a scroll down list. And here to the right is all of my folders and desktop and documents areas where I can store my folders, my files, and the work that I'm working on. Now, when you log into your system, you're probably going to not see all the applications that exist in my desktop. I actually have access to multiple courses, and so all the tools for the courses that I'm dealing with are going to show up here. Since most of you will only be enrolled in one or at most two courses at a time, you will see fewer applications because the way that we've structured the Virtual Computing Lab is such that each user will see only those tools that are relevant for the course that they are enrolled in. In this particular case, the one we want to deal with is this one right here, which is called the DIA Diagram Editor. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. So we can see that the DIA Diagram Editor has showed up on our desktop. And one of the things I wanted to do is I just wanted to point out that you need to find this toolkit. It's relatively important because we're going to be using this quite a bit. And one of the first things I'd like you to do with it is to right-click on it and click on this option that says Always on Top. That will make it much easier for us to find the tools that we're working with because they're always going to be placed on the top of the screen. The next thing I want you to do is find this option here where it says Flowchart and click on it. And what you're going to find is that there's some other options, one of them being this Other Sheets option. And when you put your cursor over it, it's going to come up with a whole bunch of different kinds of charts that we can create. What we're interested in this course is creating entity relationship diagrams, and so we're going to select on the database option so that we can actually create those for databases. So I'm going to do that right now, and what you're going to see happens here is that the tools that we have available to work with have now changed. So I have basically these three tools. They are entities, relationships, and of course different kinds of endings for those relationships. We're going to primarily use the entity and the relationship items. Next thing we want to do is we want to have some space to work on. So we're going to kind of take the DIA workspace here and expand it so we got some space to work on. And then what we'd like to do is I'm just going to pick this tool, which is the entity tool, and stick an entity out of my space. So if you recall, we've been working with a set of relations related to a library. So let's just kind of create those relations and give them names here. Now, the relation roughly is the same as an entity. So everywhere you've defined a relation in the assignments that you've been creating, you want to go out and create one of these entities there as well. So let's create one for books. So I now have a book relation. I might want to add some attributes for it. So for example, we know one of the things we have to have is we're going to have the primary key, and it's going to be that key that is unique. It's going to be uniquely able to identify the tuple. It cannot have a null value, and we're going to declare it as being our primary key. And in this case, it's book ID. It's going to have a type of integer because that's the value it's going to contain. And we're going to click on primary key and then click apply. So now I've created an entity and I've given it one attribute, which is in fact our primary key. I'm going to create another attribute for it, which is the title. It's going to be a text type, and it can have a null, or I do not want it to have, I should say I do not want it to have a null value. So what this nullable indicates here is if it is checked, it means that the value can take on a null value. In other words, it does not require a value. In this case, I don't want somebody to create, and this is one of the constraints that I have, I do not want somebody to create a new book and not have to put in a title. Every book needs to have a title, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to apply that, and then I'm going to click on OK. So I've created an entity here. It's book. I've put in two attributes. I could add additional attributes. In fact, if I want to go back and edit this, I can just simply click on right, click over it, and then select properties. But what I want to do right now is I'm just going to create another entity here, and I'm going to do that for the book lended relation that I have. So I'm going to have a book lended relationship. It's also going to need a primary key, and it's going to be a book ID. And it's going to have the borrower ID, and the sum of those two things is what allows us to have a unique primary key. Now, we could add a lot more entity or attributes to these entities, but for the sake of time, we're just going to do these two. Then what I want to do is I want to pick on the relations tool over here, and that allow me to kind of create a relationship between the two. So this is where I'm going to be able to create my diagram. And notice what we're saying here. This is showing me what the cardinality is of that relationship. So I can go into the properties here, and the way that I did that, and I probably should demonstrate that, is I right-click on the arrow itself, click on properties, and it allows me to go in and change some of these attributes, such as the style of the crow's foot that indicates many. I can go in and change my cardinality. So for example, it might be 0 to many. And now I've actually created an entity relationship diagram. I've identified my cardinality. I can actually go in and add in a description onto this that gives the nature of the relationship, and in the interest of time, we're not going to do that. Now, what I wanted to show you next is, once I've created my entire entity relationship diagram and I've documented it appropriately, I need to do something with it. And so I want to show you the preferred way of doing that. First of all, I want you to go to File. I want to export this, and I want to export it by extension. So I have this tab down here that allows me to pick the extension. In this case, I'm going to use JPEG because it's a very common graphic format that I can use. And so I'm going to give it a name here, and it's going to be ER diagram. And then I'm going to want to put it into a folder that I know where it's at. So in this particular case, I'm going to want to go in and put it into my documents folder. So I'm just going to double click on my documents folder and save it. So at this point in time, I've been able to create an entity relationship diagram. I've documented, I've created the attributes of the relations and the entities, and I've exported it out into a JPEG format. Now what do I do with it next? I want to be able to submit that as part of my assignment. So the way that I want to do that is that we're going to use OpenOffice Writer or Microsoft Word, whichever one you're using. In our case, we're going to use OpenOffice Writer and import that JPEG into it so that I can just submit the entire document at once in a format that's readable to most other students. So you typically want to save this, but we're just going to export that out. Now, where we want to go to next, and I'm going to kind of scroll down here, and you can see I have my OpenOffice Word processor. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to start up my OpenOffice. And then what I want to do is I'm going to go in and insert. So now I have a Word document open. I'm going to insert into that a picture from File, and then all I have to do is scan down to the directory that I put my diagram in. There's my ER diagram, and voila, it's now in my document. So I can kind of bring it in as an object into my document. I can put other text required around it for the assignment, and then save the entire thing. Now, what I want you to be aware of here is that when you save it, you want to go File, Save As, and then I want to make sure that we're going to pick the right kind of an extension. So we don't want to save it in the format that's by default, which is ODT. I want to make sure that I'm saving it into a format that will allow the maximum number of people to make use of it. So either use the DOC Microsoft Word format, and in particular use the Word 97 2000 XP format. You can also use rich text format, which is the .rtf format. Both of these are very generic formats that just about every word processor out there can take advantage of. So I'm going to pick the Word DOC format. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to call it my Unit 3 assignment. And click on Save. Now what we've been able to accomplish here is we've saved this as an assignment out there. Now all I have left to do is kind of click on our course site, which will bring up University of the People. I log into it. And once I get into the classroom, all I have to do is post it, and it's already sitting out there on my drive in the Documents folder, so I can just do everything right from within the virtual lab environment using the OpenOffice tools and the DIA editor tool. And again, you can kind of get a sense for where we're going here. I can simply upload that as a file to the assignment, and I'm not gonna show you how to do that. I'm just gonna actually show you how to kind of go in there, and I can upload it from the document. You can see here's documents again. I scroll down to find the where did I put it? My assignments in here somewhere, which I can't see at the moment, but you get the idea. And that's essentially how we're going to be able to create our assignments and load them up into the system, and do so with the tools that we have, which is OpenOffice and DIA. And I would absolutely prefer that you do it exactly as I've shown you here, because it means that it gives the maximum flexibility to our students. There it is, actually. So it gives the maximum flexibility to our students who are, potentially not have all of the technologies we do. So one of the things I would ask you not to do is to try to put a bunch of stuff together in a zip format or a RAR format, because a lot of times our other students are not going to have access to that. So create it with DIA, export it, import it into using OpenOffice Word, OpenOffice Writer, and then use that to create a doc or RTF formatted file that you can then post as your assignment.